What's up, YouTube? PokePrimer here, primed and ready to deliver you our Week 2 recap for the IPBL here on the channel. This week, you're going to hear we're going to have background music and everything. We're going to try to improve these as the week goes on. I made sure to fact check and double check everything before I went through. And boy, was it a very, very interesting week of competition. A lot of really, really high impact, high velocity, badass matchups took place this week. So without further ado, I'm going to stop my rambling and we are going to get into this with our first match of the week being the Toronto Tyrantrums versus the Detroit Drampas. The Toronto Tyrantrums coached by Chase and the Detroit Drampas coached by Ronnie, aka one half of the Rowlett brothers. This week, Chase wasn't able to do his battle, so Chris stepped in to cover for him. And in this matchup, Chris decided for Chase's team he would bring the Mega Charizard Y, Heliolisk, Haunter, Malamar, Granbull, and the Manaphy, while Ronnie brought the Megalodios, the Leafeon, Umbreon, Jirachi, Cofagrigus, and the Luxray. So right off the bat, it seemed like Ronnie picked the momentum up really early as the opening lead was Luxray v Manaphy, and Luxray was able to scare the Manaphy out of there really, really easily, and immediately pick up a one-hit KO on the incoming Haunter with a Wild Charge, which was really, really, really awesome. Maybe it would have lived if it was a Volt Switch, but a fully offensive Guts Luxray with Wild Charge, even though it didn't have its Guts going yet, turn 1 is going to take out that Haunter. So right off the bat, Chris is going to start off with a 6-5 disadvantage. So that's tough to deal with right off the bat. Then as the match went on, things started to go Chris's favor as a Heat Wave crit allowed the Zard Y to OHKO Ronnie's Cofagrigus, which probably would have lived the hit otherwise and at least been able to get some damage off onto the Zard. But yeah, with the Heat Wave crit, yeah, that was too much for the poor little coffin to handle. So that thing dropped real fast. A crit Hyper Voice from the Heliolisk in the sun with the solar power. Crit Hyper Voice was actually able to bring the Umbreon down to the range where it could be KO'd no matter after after 2 leftovers recoveries, I believe it was, because it was able to get leftovers and then protect again to get some more. But it was still able to take it out, which really sucked for Ronnie. So he's down. He's got a decent disadvantage going on now, and he has to do something to come back. And he goes into Megalodios, and this is probably my view, the biggest misplay of the match on either side. Instead of going for something else, because the Lisk was down pretty low. The Lisk was, I believe, down at about 35% or so. A Megalodios using just about any move could have KO'd the Heliolisk from that range. But Ronnie decided to go for the Draco Meteor, which did in fact KO the Heliolisk, but it also put Megalodios at -2, and this is what opened the door for the game over. Because in comes the Manaphy, and a -2 Megalodios either A, stays in and tickles the Manaphy, or option B, switches out into something else. And either one gives Manaphy a 100% free Tail Glow. So Tail Glow up that Manaphy did. Ice Beam the Leafeon that Manaphy did. Scald the Rachi Manaphy did. Scald the Luxray Manaphy did. And Ice Beam the Megalodios Manaphy did do to pick up a late game 4-0 sweep for the Manaphy and allowing the Toronto Tyrantrums to come out with the victory this week. The 4-0 victory over the Detroit Drampas. It was a very, very fast matchup. It was only about 18 turns. So it was really, really quick match. Nothing too spectacular went down. Gramble showed its stuff early game. It was able to kind of just have a little baby stall fest between it and the Cofagrigus before the Zard decided it wanted to come in, which is really, really cool. Malamar didn't even hit the field once. Malamar just kind of chilled in the back as a secondary option if necessary. But Manaphy was just... Manaphy showed you can't give it any opening, because if you do, that's a free Tail Glow, and that's a free sweep for Manaphy. So, Toronto Tyrantrums pick up a 4-0 victory against Detroit Drampas. On to the next match, which... Now, normally I don't like to give my own matches the moniker of Game of the Week, but I would have to say this is easily the Game of the Week this week, overall competitive-wise. Myself and the Pittsburgh Poplios taking on Jen and the Carolina Cutie Flies. Now, Jen is fairly new to competitive, so... I didn't necessarily underestimate her because she played fairly decent week 1, and I don't underestimate any opponents. I prepped pretty hard for this match, as did she, of course, and we were actually able to pull out a 1-0 victory. I, myself, decided to bring Mega Banette, Golurk, Fortress, Amoonguss, Zapdos, and Volcania On, as she decided to bring her Blissey, Donphan, Victini, Mega Metagross, Diancie, and the Haxorus. So, right off the bat, we were able to, we led with our Mega Banette, immediately scaring out the Donphan, and learning early on that after a taunt, we are able, the Mega Banette was able to completely wall the Blissey, which is really, really good information to have early game, because then that basically means that if we can, if predictions worked right, and we could get Mega Banette in without getting T-waved, we can basically just taunt and wall the Blissey for days. The Blissey's moveset ended up, we learning it through the match, Counter, Seismic Toss, Thunder Wave, and Soft Boiled. So basically, after a taunt, the only thing it can really touch us with is the only thing it would ever be able to touch us with is the Thunder Wave, and that's not going to do any damage, so it's really not that, it really wouldn't have been that huge of a deal. But knowing that Banette, and finding out slightly later on in the match after finding out the full moveset, that Golurk walled it as well. It was really, really huge. That's why I brought my 2 Ghost types this week, as a way to stop the Blissey entirely from doing anything. Victini was scary from Team Preview. Victini was scary. I had things prepped for it in the Conberry on Volcania On. So I was somewhat ready for it, but it's still, at the same time, it's still terrifying. Mega Metagross is always a threat, but and honestly, like there's not much you can do to prep for it. I mean, my way of beating it in my head was A, live a hit with Volcania On and Fire Blast it, or B, burn it with Mega Banette and just whittle it down with my walls. And of course, Haxorus is terrifying 100% of the time. Early game, Banette taking that early game momentum, was able to burn the Diancie after it switched in and knocked off its Babiri Berry, which is a really, really cool prep on her part, smart to bring. A Babiri Berry would have been really good if it ended up in a matchup against my Fortress, because it did reveal shortly thereafter that it did have the HP Fire, which is really, really cool. So she would have been able to 1v1 the Fortress, which is smart prep on her part. Huge kudos to that. To you, Jen, for that one. That's really good. Yeah, we burned the Diancie with Mega Banette, and we're able to go into Amoonguss and pretty much stall it down, taking relatively little damage from the HP Fires, and then switching into Volcania On to take the last one. We took only like 3%, which is really, really cool. So Banette was able to get the burn on there to whittle it down, so that's kill number 1 for Mega Banette, which made me really happy. I want Mega Banette to do a lot this season, so I really, really plan on trying to use it in such a manner. But Golurk was able to come in pretty much every time that the Blissey came in and click Earthquake. I had a sub Rock Polish set, but as long as the Donphan was around, it was dumb to set up a Rock Polish, because, you know, simply put, to put it mildly, you know, Donphan kind of stopped us from sweeping anything ever, so it would have been kind of pointless. Especially with its leftovers, it was gaining back just about as much as we were doing, or no, enough that it was keeping it to like a 4, maybe 5 hit KO, depending on the leftovers and the rolls I was getting. But one of the times the Donphan switched in, the Earthquake ended up being a critical hit, which brought the Donphan in range for a second EQ to kill it. So we got really, really, really lucky on that one. Yeah, a lot of luck there. There's a lot of hacks in this match. The crit, that crit was huge. The following turn was definitely the most pivotal piece of hacks in the match, I think. The Mega Metagross came in against the Golurk, knowing it can outspeed, went for an Ice Punch, did a tremendous amount of damage, but then it was able to freeze the Golurk, completely neutralizing it. Earthquake would have done at least 75% to the Metagross, which would have been huge damage, and I potentially could have swapped out, knowing it was going for Ice Punches. But it then just went for an EQ the following turn to finish off the Golurk, which is really unfortunate. I wanted the sub Rock Polish Golurk set to do work this week, but you know, what can you do? Shit happens. Victini was able to come in after Mega Metagross came in, tries to burn the Metagross. Victini comes in. Victini was then able to get a paralysis off of Bolt Strike on my incoming Amoonguss. The prediction was solid. I figured that she was going to go for a Bolt Strike, predicting my Volcanion switch in. As I did actually decide to go for the Amoonguss. Very, very risky play, because she could have gone either for Psychic Stab, which I don't believe she brought, if I'm remembering her team builder correctly. But also risking the potential V-Create. But knowing that I have a Volcanion available to switch into that, I didn't think she was going to click V-Create this early in the matchup. So the para on the Amoonguss comes in huge clutch later. I get a full para as the Bliss. I did get a full para as the Blissey came in. I tried to Spore, but you know, that's unfortunate. But based on the damage it did to Amoonguss, I was able to confirm in my mind that Victini was not banded, which was very, very important to the matchup as a whole. So that's huge and very important information for us to have. As for the matches as it went on, Fortress got paralyzed by the Blissey, and then got fully paralyzed twice in a row while trying to set up rocks. Hugely annoying situation, but the rocks did go up, which was very, very important. Metagross ended up staying in on a Will-O-Wisp, maybe predicting us to switch like we did the previous time, or predicting us maybe to over-predict and try to switch around to try and catch the Victini, which would potentially come in on the Will-O-Wisp. But again, we were perfectly fine with, you know, Victini wanting to switch in on us. I was perfectly fine with it. But we were able to burn it and bring our Scarf Zapdos in to outspeed and kill it off with a Volt Switch. A very pivotal part of the match as well. The Victini was in a situation where it came in against the Volcanion, and due to the fact of it being Choice Scarfed, 100%, goes for a Bolt Strike, and the Conberry Volcanion is able to live the Bolt Strike at about 2%. It did about 36%. So we lived at about 2%, and we're able to take out the Victini with a Steam Eruption, which was very, very huge. But that one turn led to one of the most terrifying moments of the match, where the Haxorus basically came in for free against the Volcanion. Now, this Haxorus was packing a Lumberry, which is horrifying. to say the least. Not only was it able to set up in Volcania On's face safely, did not get burned by Steam Eruption, was able to quickly take out the Volcania On, so that was scary. Now, the rest of this match comes down to, if I get haxed, bad shit happens. If I don't get haxed, good shit happens. At this point, it's a really, 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 really tight matchup. It's 4 to 2 at this point in the match. Okay? Get that in your mindset. Zapdos, Amoonguss, Fortress, and Mega Banette versus Haxorus and Blissey. Okay? Set the mood. Go into Zapdos, and this is probably one of the bigger misplays in the match. Without thinking about it, could have easily Volt Switched, sacked off the Fortress, and then if it didn't kill, could have come back in and tried to kill with a second Volt Switch, or something else of the sort with Zapdos, but instead clicked the Scarf Thunder Wave to try and stop the Haxorus sweep before it could happen, and right as the Thunder Wave was clicked, it immediately popped into head. Shit, she's Lum. Turns out Lum Berry pops, and the Haxorus wipes out the Zapdos. That's 2 down for the Hax. Now going into the Amoonguss, it's paralyzed, but we're fine. As long as we break through paralysis, we click Foul Play, and the Haxorus goes down. And then 3-0 victory for the Pittsburgh Poplios, right? Wrong. Outrage comes through against the Amoonguss and does a tremendous amount of damage, does about 78% to the Amoonguss, and the Amoonguss is fully paralyzed, which allows the Haxorus to basically take it out. At this point, the Haxorus is confused, and I literally told her, if you don't hit yourself in confusion, I lose this game. 100%, that was the situation we were in. If she did not hit herself in confusion one time, we would lose the game, because the Haxorus would be able to just pick off the rest of my team. Mega Banette was only sitting at about 33%. Fortress was sitting at like 5. It was pretty much game over. She breaks through the first turn, takes out Amoonguss. That's 3 kills for Haxorus. The next turn, finally the Haxorus hits itself in confusion. Thankfully, thank the Lord, hits itself in confusion, and Fortress is able to take it out with a Gyro Ball. At this point, the match was won. Blissey comes in, picks off the Fortress with a Seismic Toss, and Mega Banette comes in. At this point, she decides to forfeit, which basically just gives the kill to Mega Banette, because Mega Banette would have just sat there, taunted, and knocked off till it died, allowing the Poplios to pull away a 1-0 victory. This match was so ridiculously close, right up till the very, very end, where it literally came down to confusion hacks in order to pull off the win. Excellent game to Jen. Excellent game on both ends. It was just a fantastic match to watch, fantastic match to be a part of. Just overall great stuff, and I'm honored that I was a part of it as well. But enough rambling about my match, because I don't want to talk about it any more than I have to, and I've talked about it more than I should have. We are going to move on to the next game, which turns out to be the Massachusetts Charizards, and I missed the button. Massachusetts Charizards versus the Charlotte Salandits. And this match as well was a one-sided beat down. The Charizards did not show up this week. They decided to bring their Mega Tyranitar, Excadrill, Dragonite, Electros, Florges, Trevenant, and the Charlotte Salandits brought the Registeel, Suicune, Raikou, Weezing, Tauros, and Infernape. So, turn one, mistakes were being made. Registeel versus Florges. Florges goes for Protect, giving Registeel the free chance to set up rocks. Now, the following few turns were extremely confusing, as For some reason, Josh decided to switch his Dragonite in on the Stealth Rocks that were just recently put up to go 1v1 with the Registeel, as the Registeel goes for an Iron Head. So right off the bat, the Dragonite comes in and it's starting off below 50%, which is really, really bad. So that's a problem. Then proceeds to go ahead and Heat Wave as the Registeel then paralyzes the Dragonite. And after a full pair, the Registeel is able to 1v1 a Dragonite, which I don't think should ever happen in my opinion. But I don't know what Josh's mindset was going into that move. That series of moves, I don't know what his mindset was. Maybe he figured that Dragonite was essentially useless without the rocks, even though he has Excadrill on his team, which could have been spinning. But, yeah, again, I'm not sure what his mindset was there. He might have had a plan in mind that just didn't pan out. Who knows? But, the momentum stayed on the side of Chris and the Slandits, as the Weezing was able to come in against the Trevenant and pretty much 1v1 it. 1v1 it dead. The Trevenant was able to burn the Weezing, but that didn't really do much, as the Weezing was just able to whittle down the Trevenant with Sludge Waves and Flamethrowers and eventually take it out. There's an unfortunate... There was a series of double switches at one point in the matchup, which was actually really, really interesting. The Massachusetts Charizards had their Excadrill in. They were able to switch their Excadrill in on the Registeel. They switched their Florges into Excadrill as the Salandit switched into Registeel, which was huge. Very, very good play on Josh's part to predict the Registeel coming in. It was very, very good play. But then, I believe that he predicted that the Registeel would switch out to avoid being KO'd by the Excadrill. Maybe he predicted that the, I don't know what he predicted would come in, but he decided for some reason to double into his Mega Tyranitar, as the Registeel actually stayed in and went for an Earthquake, which brought the T-Tar down a bit further, and after an Iron Head flinch, basically the Registeel was able to para-flinch the Mega T-Tar down. However, this whole situation could have been avoided, as the Excadrill came in immediately thereafter, went for Earthquake, and was able to take out the Registeel from the range it was at. It lost no HP against the Tyranitar, so right there you can see the whole situation could have been completely avoided if Josh had just gone for the EQ with the Excadrill. So you know, everyone makes mistakes, so I'm not gonna brag too hard on him for it. Just, you know, something that you can think of in the future. Maybe run the calcs and see if your move has a chance to KO. Probably a good bet to do. But that's just my thought process on it, I suppose. But yeah. So from there, Florges ended up 1v1 against Coon, and then Suicune just basically was able to set up on it, which is really fun, because, you know, setting up with a Suicune is fun. However, AV, I believe it was AV, I'm not sure of the set, but I believe it was AV Dragon Tail Electros was actually able to fully counter that and remove the boosts, but was very quickly revenged by the Raikou, which came in and just Aura Sphered it to death. I believe the Raikou might have been Scarfed, because when it ended up in a situation against Florges, it then immediately swapped out, as the Florges, even after leftovers, was then able to die to its burn, which the Suicune gave it earlier in the matchup. So at this point, it's essentially about to turn into Excadrill versus the world, and that world came crumbling down very quickly as the Infernape came in against the Excadrill on the free switch provided by Florges dying. Alright, I don't remember exactly the situation that got them in, but regardless of that, Infernape was able to get into the matchup beautifully, and the Excadrill immediately thereafter died to a Flare Blitz, picking up a 5-0 victory for the Charlottes and Landits. Josh just didn't seem on his game in this matchup. Josh just seemed very, very off. A lot of his plays didn't make a lot of sense. Like the Dragonite coming in early game, not EQing the Registeel with the Excadrill. Those couple of plays just didn't make any sense. And he allowed his team to get whittled down a lot more than he should have. The only one I can see being, a relevant one was the Electros, because he needed to go for that Dragon Tail to get that Suicune out of there so that it didn't end up sweeping him. So outside of that, it just seemed like an off match, and Chris pretty much held the momentum throughout the entire game, spreading the kills nice and evenly through the whole team. But poor Mr. Tauros, I just want to point out, poor Mr. Tauros has come 2 weeks in a row now, probably with a dope-ass set. I don't know what kind of set he came up with, but the set was probably pretty dope. And Tauros just kind of chilled on the back burner, man. Tauros is just kind of chilling in the background. Poor guy not getting to do anything, man. But, congrats to the Charlotte Landits on a 5-0 victory in this very one-sided matchup. The final match this week, and I wanted to make this one the final one because this is a very, very important match, in my opinion. This is essentially a battle of the brothers, as we have Juwan and the Alabama Arcanines taking on Justin and the Tony Typhlosion. These guys have been best friends for ages. Justin decides to bring the Togetic, the Kyurem Black, the Miltank, Galvantula, Ambipom, and Mega Scizor, as the Alabama Arcanines bring the Tornadus Therian, Mega Swampert, Scyther, Spiritomb, Uxie, and the Garchomp. Turn 1, right off the bat, there was a bit of a misplay, in my opinion. Justin likes to focus on clicking the super effective moves that he sees in front of him. It was Kyurem Black versus Tornadus T, and while Outrage would have actually done a lot more damage to the Torn T, and actually would have basically guaranteed a 2 KO on everything on Juwan's team, he decided to go for the Fusion Bolt, which allowed the Uxie to switch in freely and take well under half. This then led the Uxie to be able to get rid of Kyurem's Life Orb, which made it a lot less of a threat. Still a huge threat because it's a max attack Kyurem Black, but due to that lack of a Life Orb, the Kyurem became the Kyurem became much less of a threat as the match progressed, and could have been avoided if Outrage had just been clicked, because the Uxie would have actually been 2-hit KO based upon the damage of Outrage when once the Uxie was in against it. So, early game, and that's just my advice to Justin. Definitely run some calcs if you have the opportunity to during a match. I know you were at Juwan's place, I believe. You guys were in the same room and everything, but it still never hurts to attempt to run your calcs, because then you would have realized, oh hey, shit, Outrage does more than Fusion Bolt, and we can just kind of basically 2-hit KO everything, and that would have allowed for a better opening game. However, Juwan was not without his own misplays, in my opinion. Garchomp is a huge threat to any team, and he brought it in against the Kyurem Black, which could have easily revenge killed it and stopped its momentum entirely. However, the Garchomp decided to set up rocks against the Kyurem Black, which was locked into Outrage, mind you. The Kyurem Black was guaranteed going for Outrage that turn. A super effective base 120 power hit from a base 170 attack Mon, and just takes the Outrage to the face as it sets up the rocks. Now, I'm not 100% certain as to whether that would have killed or not. I'm not 100% certain of that, and I actually believe I'm going to go ahead and figure that out right now. So you guys are going to see you guys are going to see some shit going down. I want to make sure, I want to see if that play, I'm going to drag this over here. You guys are going to see some different stuff. I apologize, but I want to make sure, I want to run this calc for you guys because you guys deserve to know what's going down. So we're going to go ahead, we're going to say just a max attack, 252 max attack, Kyurem Black without any item because it was in fact knocked off against a Garchomp. I'm going to say offensive Stealth Rock because it did outspeed it, so it definitely had speed investment. We're going to go ahead and put you as Naive Nature because that is what you were. And we are going to go with Outrage. Outrage, even without a Life Orb, does one-hit KO a speedier Garchomp build, which means essentially the correct play for Juwan would have been to go for the Dragon Claw. Dragon Claw did a minimum of 67%, which would have been able to KO the Kyurem from the range it was sitting at, if I remember correctly, because after Life Orb recoils and the knockoff, it was sitting at around 65%. So the Garchomp could have KO'd it. Instead, it decides to set up its rocks, which were not really effective in the broad scheme of the match, but we'll get to that. But, yeah, Outrage guaranteed one-hit KO'd the Garchomp, so the crit didn't necessarily matter, but, you know, it's still something to note that it was, in fact, a critical hit. But, continuing on with the matchup, Rain Dance Spiritomb was revealed a little bit later in the match after Togetic was able to defog the rocks. The Spiritomb set up the rain as the defog went off, which was really, really cool. Rain Dance Spiritomb was nice. Good way to keep the rain off of Swampert so that you don't have to waste that move slot and you can just fit coverage moves on there, which is really, really cool. So in comes the Swampert against the Togetic and is able to easily wipe it out. But Justin was prepared for this, brings in his Galvantula, and with the Focus Sash is able to live the waterfall. Thankfully did not flinch and was able to click the Energy Ball and finish off the Mega Swampert, which is really, really, really good. Really, really good for Justin, so that's a huge threat gone and out of the way. Torntea just picks off the Galvantula at this point, and then we end up in a situation where it is Scyther versus Ambipom, and this is a bit of a misplay on, I'd say a kind of a misplay on Justin's part, but not really, because he essentially did what he had to do in this situation. He started clicking Ice Punches with his Ambipom, as the Scyther was able to get up a Swords Dance, and basically just started setting up all over the Ambipom. The Scyther was able to then take out the Ambipom, and in a 1v1 with the Mega Scizor, was also able to do the same. Was able to whittle it down with Aerial Aces until the Mega Scizor dropped. Now, at this point, the game was pretty much sealed, or should have been sealed. The Scyther was at +2. Could have easily continued the cleanup and won the game against the Meltank. But Juwan actually got a bit greedy here. Definitely got greedy in my opinion. As he goes for another Swords Dance, as he starts to set up more against the Meltank after being paralyzed from a Body Slam. Starts to set up more. And in a situation where the Body Slam is doing a decent little chunk of damage, the play was definitely to Roost. The Meltank outsped based upon his bulkier build. The Meltank did outspeed, so it's not like you could Roost before the Meltank killed it. But he ended up in a situation where he was at about 34%, or about 34%, I believe, and the Body Slams were doing like a minimum of 17 every single time. So at that point, you guarantee that it was a guaranteed 2-hit KO from that range. Juwan should have gone for the Roost to preserve the Scyther. He had set up to +4 at that point. If he had Roosted, he would have easily been able to set to +6 and then finish off the super duper bulky Meltank that was sitting in front of him, but instead he did just go for the Swords Dance that turn, gets knocked down to 17%, and the Meltank was then able to pick up the KO on the Scyther and stop the sweep entirely, which was really, really, really painful. And to retract an earlier statement, it didn't. The Meltank didn't outspeed due to Scyther's bulky build. It outsped due to the paralysis. Just wanted to correct myself there, so the comment section didn't get a chance to do so. Ha ha ha. Sucks to be you. You're gonna correct me anyway, because I know you will, because that's just what y'all do, and I appreciate you for it. But yeah, so Scyther's sweep ended there. It didn't have to end. It could have won him the game, but y'all, we all make mistakes, and Juwan definitely just got greedy with the setup, and that was definitely the play that essentially could have sealed him the game. At this point, the Meltank was then just able to pull back the game for Justin, as Meltank was able to whittle down the Tornadus as the Tornadus' defenses dropped due to the superpower, which did under half, which is really, really cool to see. Meltank's super duper bulky. Did under half, hits it with an ice, and hits it with 2 ice punches after a hurricane miss as well, which definitely was huge, but I don't think as huge as it could have been. And then we ended up in a bit of a stall war between the Meltank and the Spiritomb, where Ice Punch needed to be spammed because, you know, the Meltank on Justin's side was running Thick Fat instead of Scrappy, which was a decision that just needed to be made, as Juwan's team had the necessary things that Thick Fat would have stopped. But like Darmanitan, pretty much allowed Meltank to switch freely into Darmanitan and stuff like that. So it was a good set on Justin's part, just didn't work well against the Spiritomb. But Ice Punch ends up freezing the Spiritomb, and at that point, Juwan essentially gave up the match. He forfeited, allowing Meltank to pick up that final kill and get a late game 3-0 cleanup against the Alabama Arcanines, allowing Justin to finally beat Juwan. I can't say that it wasn't due to the hacks, because that hacks did matter. That freeze did matter, because I do believe in the long game of it, Spiritomb would have been able to stall out the Heal Bells and Milk Drinks on the Meltank and beat it 1v1. However, at the same time, you know, there were misplays on both sides that could have swung, that if done differently could have swung the game in a dozen different ways. So not really sure how to know what would have happened if the plays and hacks would have been different, but you know, hacks happens, it's part of Pokemon, what can you do? Justin is able to pick up a 1-0 victory over Juwan. And with that, guys, we are going to conclude our Week 2 matchups, and we are going to move immediately into the MVP rankings, which have been severely shaken up this week. We now have a 3-way tie for first place here in the MVP rankings. We've got Haxorus, Infernape, and Manaphy all sitting at 5 and 1 with a +4 differential. Haxorus picking up a 3-1 Dragon Dance late game bashing on the Pittsburgh Poplios. Infernape picking up the game-ending kill on the Excadrill in the Charlotte versus Massachusetts match in order to keep its top 3 slot. And Manaphy picking up a 4-0 Tail Glow late-game sweeperoonie against the Detroit Drampas. And that being our top 3, let's take a look at the rest of the top 10. We have Mega Blastoise, Meloetta, and Meltank all tied for 4th place with 3 kills, 0 deaths, and a +3 differential from the Massachusetts Charizards, Pittsburgh Poplios, and Tony Typhlosions, respectively. Following that, we have Volcania On with 3 kills, 1 death, +2 differential from the Pittsburgh Poplios. We have Garchomp from the Alabama Arcanines, 3-2 with a +1 differential. Following that, we have a new member of the list this week, being Mega Banette, picking up 2 kills this week and 0 deaths against the Carolina Cutie Flies. They're giving it a +2 differential, and just barely clinging on to its the last spot on the top 10 this week is Entei with 2 kills, 1 death, +1 differential from the Detroit Drampas. So you can see that the countdown this week is very, very interesting. I do want to note, tied with Entei and almost making a list, the only reason they weren't on the list was entirely due to Alphabet being a thing. Registeel and Scyther are both tied with Entei for that last number 10 slot. So, just cool to note that a mon like Registeel is literally on the cusp of the top 10 after one good solid week of performance for it, which is really, really cool to note. But hopefully we can see some more shakeup in the list. I mean, we see a lot of commonly seen mons like Manaphy, Infernape, Haxorus, a lot of really commonly offensive mons, Garchomp, and Volcania On, but you do see the walls here as well. You see Mega Banette, who's not commonly seen even in the league format. You see Meltank, who's really, really not typically known for picking up a lot of kills. So early in the season, you're going to see stuff like that where just a wall outdoes a team or something like that, and it's going to pick itself up on the MVP rankings. And it's really, really cool to see because, I'm the one who's really into seeing walls in the top 10. I know in the first league I was ever in, the first big-time league I was ever in, the one that I won, the PFCFL, the MVP for the season ended up being Umbreon, which is really, really cool to see. That thing put in a lot of work against a lot of teams and just stalled for days, which is really cool. But, yeah. With that, guys, that is going to conclude our look at the MVP rankings for this week. And we will now move on to check out the league standings. At the top of the Kanto division, we have the Charlotte Salandits 2-0 with a +8 differential after a very impressive 5-0 victory over the Massachusetts Charizards this week. The Pittsburgh Poplios follow close behind in second place with the 2-0 record as well, with a +4 differential after an extremely close game with the Carolina Cutie Flies. Speaking of the Carolina Cutie Flies, they are in third place right now, 1-1 with a 0 differential, winning 1-0 week 1 and losing 1-0 this week. And then to round out the Kanto division, we have the Massachusetts Charizards, 1-1 with a -2 differential after a really rough week. Moving over to the Johto Conference, we have the Toronto Tyrantrums, coached by Chase, in the number 1 slot. Holy crap. 1-1 with a +1 differential, being the only member of the Johto division to have a positive differential, which at this point in the season, which is really kind of crazy to see. Next up, in second place, we have the Tony Typhlosions, 1-1 with a -2 differential. Tied for differential as well is going to be the Alabama Arcanines, who are 0-2 with a -2 differential. Now, mind you, both of their losses so far have been extremely close. They have been 1-0s, so definitely do not count the Alabama Arcanines out just yet, because they are a fantastic team, and Joanna is a great battler. So, for real, do not count them out by any means. They are certainly still a force to be reckoned with. And lastly, closing out the Johto division, we have the Detroit Drampas, 0-2 with a -7 differential. Just can't get out of the blocks this season. They've been making some team changes here and there to kind of fix up their issues. So hopefully those free agency swaps and such that they've been doing will help them better their team to the point where they can potentially start picking up some victories in the later weeks. But now that we've seen the standings and where everyone sits at the current time, we can now take a look at next week's matchups and see what we have in store. We have, first off, the battle of the Fire Starters. Gen 1 v Gen 2. Who's better? Charizard or Typhlosion. We have Massachusetts Charizards, coached by Josh, taking on Justin and the Tony Typhlosions. This is going to be a really, really decent matchup. Really, really tough match overall, I think, with the potential of the sand on the Charizard's team going up against the absolute monster that is Kieran Black, which can pretty much blow back the Sandmons very effectively, and having things like Hitmonlee, which can pretty much outspeed the sand threats as well with the Unburden boost. It's going to be really, really interesting to see what both teams bring to counter such things next week. So it's going to be a really fantastic match. Then we have the Carolina Cutie Flies taking on the Toronto Tyrantrums. Both of them are actually very, very close in record and differential. The only one with the Tyrantrums being ahead by 1 differential point overall. But definitely cannot count Jen out. Her matches have been extremely close this season so far. Chase's victory came also from another coach, taking over his team to cover for him this week. So definitely keep that into account, that it was not Chase battling. So we don't know. All we know of Chase battling with his team is he lost week 1. Basically, his only time using his team so far has been a 3-0 loss in week 1. So, with that being to judge off of, Jen definitely has the upper hand for this matchup, but it can go either way because, the Tyrantrum's team is really, really threatening. Overall, with Zard Y, the potential for Tail Glow, Manaphy, and such against Jen's team, which could really put in a lot of work. And Zard Y absolutely terrifies the Mega Metagross, so it's going to be really, really interesting to see how the two go at it with each other. The next matchup on the card for next week is going to be number 1 versus number 0. The first place versus last place in the league. Ronnie and the Detroit Drampas are going to be taking on the Charlotte Salandit and Chris. The Rowlett brothers are facing off this week. It's going to be really, really interesting to see the dynamic of this matchup. After some recent free agents trades by Ronnie, seeing how his team has changed, as well as Chris's. Both teams have been changing recently, and we're going to see how the matchup this week goes, with the new additions of Jirachi being swapped for Weavile, and the Salandits swapping their I can't remember what mon they dropped. I believe it was Crustle for Cradilly. It's going to be interesting to see how those mons play a role in the matchup as well. Ronnie's team against Chris's is actually looking fairly threatening. From my perspective, I can definitely see his team being a huge threat. Having things like Mega Latias, which can pretty much wall and set up alongside Crocoon, pretty much shuts down Raikou, beats the Weezing, beats the Tauros. Bulky enough set can pretty much shut down Infernape. Just overall, if a good Latias, Mega Latias set pretty much shuts down a large portion of Chris's squad, potentially. Just overall, and things like Scizor can't really do too much to save it. Virizion can't stop it. So definitely, Chris has things that can stop it, but at the same time, Ronnie has the same kind of things to stop those as well. So it's going to be really, really interesting match to see the clash of the Rowlett brothers next week. It's going to be really, really cool. And the last match for next week is going to be myself and the Pittsburgh Poplios taking on Juwan and the Alabama Arcanines. The Alabama Arcanines have been off to a rocky start to the season so far, being 0-2 right now. But again, losing both matches only 1-0. and having the only match between myself and Juwan in league format, going to Juwan, Juwan picking up the victory in that matchup. Definitely cannot count him out, because he definitely could win this matchup. He's really, really good at this game, so I mean, he could definitely pull out the win against us. So it's just gonna be a tough match regardless. We're gonna have to be really, really careful as to how we play this matchup in order to potentially pull out a win. But with that, guys, that is going to conclude our Week 2 recap here in the IPBL. If you guys enjoyed, please make sure to leave a like down below and subscribe if you haven't already. Definitely head over to Ronnie's channel over to check out the Rowlett brothers as they do the power rankings for the IPBL as well, so you can definitely check those out. He typically tries to have those out on Wednesday or Thursday. He tries to have them out as close to the weekly recap as possible, so you should be able to see them either today or tomorrow, hopefully. But definitely, he does a really, really good job with that. I'm really, really proud of him for how he's doing with the series so far. But yeah, head over there and check that out. Also, head over to Chris's channel. He is uploading he's trying his best to upload all of his battles for the Charlotte Salandits as well. So check that out, and also check out Jen's channel, Cuddly Cutie Fly. Also will be linked in the description as well. She is uploading all of her battles, and she's also doing team builders, which is really, really cool. So you can see her thought processes as she goes into each matchup. So definitely some cool stuff going on there. But without further ado, guys, I'm gonna end this thing off here. Until next time, till next week, IPBL fans, I'm PokePrimer, and I'm signing off.